Growing up, I lived with strictly conservative parents, and it's been something that I have been trying and failing to leave behind all my life. I don't want to delve too deep into my childhood memories on this thread, as it's something that I've been avoiding. Although my therapist says that talking is good, so I've been trying to follow her advice and openly discuss my childhood traumas with anyone who would listen. No one really wants to listen, though. No one wants to listen about my incredibly overbearing parents. The weird rules that they had about how I wasn't ever allowed to have friends around, never allowed out the house past 7 p.m., and under no circumstances was I allowed out of my bedroom after 9 p.m. My parents never told me why. They just said it was when they could have their special time, whatever that meant. They made sure I abided by their rules by locking me in my room at night, so that I could not sneak around even if I wanted to. This became a regular, everyday occurrence, and something that I slowly grew accustomed to, until I no longer asked questions, no longer cried when they told me for the 16th time that my friend Susan wasn't allowed in the house, and no longer worried them every hour for a glass of water or the bathroom. They installed a kind of small cat flap into my room when I turned 10, outside of which they left me glasses of water and snacks if I got hungry. By this point, I was pretty much toilet trained and no longer needed to use the bathroom several times a night, which meant I no longer needed the toilet bucket they have been providing me for as long as I can remember. Great parents they were, right? The only time I ever enjoyed living there with them was around the holidays. Christmas was the best time, as I was never locked in my room at night. And this was because my parents once said that Christmas is the only time they take a break from their special hobby. I never knew what the hobby was, and I was never allowed to ask. I did once, and I was locked away at 8 p.m. instead of 9 p.m., and I never asked again after that. I hated it, because I wasn't even allowed to keep my lights on either. I was just supposed to get in bed and sleep immediately. What child can ever go to sleep straight away? Several uneventful years passed, and I grew accustomed to my daily routine. Wake up, go to school, come back, read a book, go to bed, wake up, and repeat. My mental health, however, was declining slowly but surely. I felt incredibly lonely all the time, and I became very introverted, even in school. My friends didn't understand, so they stopped talking to me. My parents, well, I wasn't a priority to them, so it isn't something that they were overly concerned with. They thought it was just teenage hormones. Not the fact that they kept locking me away in my room every night for years and not bothering to explain why. On the eve of my 13th birthday, October 4th, 1999, I decided it was time to find out. It was a pleasant evening, mild and ordinary. I'd been quiet most of the day. That's nothing unusual, especially not to my parents, so they thought nothing of it when I decided to retire to my room early. 7:30 p.m. in fact. They didn't ask any questions. Didn't even flinch. Both of them just sat there, looking somewhat despondent, but I thought it's best not to ask questions. I'd learned the hard way by now. My plan was to wait until midnight. I would climb out the window and let myself back into the house with the keys that my parents never knew I had. I waited patiently. Time was all that I had, and filling empty hours and staring at walls had become somewhat of a pastime for me. I was excited to finally break the monotony. Nervousness was entirely an alien feeling to me, so all I could do was sit and wait. Once it hit midnight, I stood up and went to my window. I'd learned how to be extremely quiet by now. I didn't make a sound. Our house was quite tall. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor, so I was hesitant, of course. But I was quite a tall child by then, so I didn't worry too much about a sudden fall or slipping off the roof. I had been planning this for quite some time and was heavily prepared. And also, as I mentioned, I was somewhat adept to my lack of emotion. I walked over to the bedroom window and opened it. It was easy. My windows were never locked because my parents didn't take me as the gutsy type. I'd always been quite a timid child, quiet and receptive, so I knew they wouldn't expect this sort of behavior from me. And plus, they'd drilled those impulses from me long ago with their cruelty. But I needed to find out what went on in the house. The urge was more powerful than the fear of the repercussions I would receive should I be discovered. I'm digressing. I do apologize. I was on the roof of my home, crawling slowly. I did this to avoid being seen and to minimize noise that I made when I heard a sound. It was coming from the direction of my parents' bedroom. I was crawling past their window. Annoyingly, their curtains were shut so I couldn't see anything, but that sound, it was peculiar, to say the least. I crawled a little closer and realized that it was the sound of hushed whispers. The words were muffled but in unison. It almost sounded like a chant of some kind. It was just me and my parents in the house, but the sound that came from the bedroom, it seemed like there were at least 10 people in there. It made me feel really uncomfortable, scared even. That's not something I was used to. It did, however, urge me to continue. I was even more intent on finding out what my parents were doing. I continued to crawl until I came to the roof of the second floor of the house. I was then able to get all the way down to the ground. The house was shrouded in darkness. I knew it was midnight, but still it was sinister, eerie. I walked towards the front door and opened it with the key that I had hidden in the bottom of my shoe. I opened it slowly to ensure that it didn't creak. It was an old house. What I saw as soon as I stepped through the door were candles. Candles absolutely everywhere. There was a candle on every single free space in the downstairs front room. Kitchen, guest room, even in the bathroom. I didn't even know we had this many candles in the house. I continued to take small, cautious steps forward until I came to the bottom of the stairs. I could hear the chanting again, so I began to ascend the stairs. The closer I got to the top, the louder the chanting became. I couldn't hear what language it was, but it most definitely was not English. Eventually, I was homeschooled and my parents wanted me to learn as many languages as I could. So, as I got closer, I perhaps thought it sounded like Russian, but I didn't think it was a comprehensible dialect. Not one that normal people spoke, anyway. The candles lined the upstairs hallway. Every single closed door had 2 candles on either side of them, except for mine. I suddenly heard a quick shuffling behind me. I turned around, but the darkness in the house was so impenetrable that I couldn't make out anything. I looked down in front of my parents' bedroom. In the space that was illuminated by the 2 candles, I saw a pair of feet. I backed away quickly, but realized I couldn't get back into my bedroom because I didn't have a key, and of course it was locked. I felt what I assumed was panic surge through me so quickly I went into the bathroom and locked the door. Candles illuminated the room, albeit dimly. I tried to turn the lights on, but they wouldn't work. I flipped the switch up and down a few times to no avail. And that's when I heard the shuffling again. But outside the door this time, which was then followed by a quiet but distinct knock.